Oh, cool. Let's start off with a short self-introduction. So yeah, Matt, would you like to give us a brief self-introduction, like who you are, where you're from, stuff like that?
Yeah, so currently I am a freshman studying at Stanford University. I'm doing mathematics and creative writing in some capacity. I'm not exactly sure like how that's going to work degree-wise, but that's what I'm most interested in. Um, and I'm also like a writer. I love, writing stories and novels and sometimes poetry as well. And that's probably like, that was one of my biggest passions in high school. And that's something I'm
Mhm.
still really passionate about today. Um, and I'd say like other things, I really love playing tennis. I love board games, puzzles, like all that stuff. And yeah,
Who are you a fan of? Who's your favorite tennis player?
I'm a big Federer fan, which is like
Yeah, same.
kind of a basic answer, but he's
Yeah.
like amazing.
Yeah.
Um,
Really interesting anecdote for y'all. So I came in contact with Matt because I was reading the national gold medalist for Scholastic, which is this competition for like art and writing. And I came across this piece and I just really liked it. So I just hit him up and then DM'd him, and so now we're here. So that's what we're gonna open off with. So Matt, would you care to like read a little portion of your writing for Scholastic that you won a national gold medal with? Yellow is not a flattering color.
yeah, sure. I'll read. How about, yeah, I could read the first page or so. Does
Mhm,
that sound good?
mhm.
Okay. Anyone who write Yellow is not a flattering color. That's the title. Anyone who rifled through my desk could tell yellow was my favorite color. They'd unlatch the cardboard box of crayons and shake it above their head, searching for a magenta or sepia to borrow. The yellow crayon would fall out, a small stub, nose nibbled away, naked without a rough paper robe, the most pristine jewel in my wax treasure chest. Then I'd return from the restroom and usher them away, slamming a protective hand over my unfinished masterpiece. My teachers did not appreciate the beauty of yellow, telling me it did not show on white paper. I thought they weren't scribbling hard enough. Yellow gurgled all along my drawings, from the quarter pie sun in the corner of the page to the onion ring bumblebees with foot-long stingers, and the shapen chunks of Swiss cheese I held in my palm like an Italian waiter. When I couldn't find the peach crayon, I'd use yellow as the replacement skip tone, a solution that seems rather problematic in retrospect. But yellow was the color of all of the cheerful things in life, banana slugs and Pikachu and egg yolk. So of course I'd consider it an honor for one to become yellow as well. We moved into a new house just before I turned 7. It was square and charming, with plushes bustling around the garage door. But most importantly, it was painted a chipper yellow. My parents cited several reasons for the move: worthwhile real estate investment, safe neighborhood, proximity to nice restaurants. But I decided it was because they knew I loved yellow and wanted to make me happy. 10 years later, the paint has mostly peeled away, leaving a pale grayish hue graffitied with cobwebs and soot stains. We plan to move again soon. I do not remember when I stopped liking yellow. It must have been 4th grade or maybe 5th. I transitioned, like many do, to preferring blue, specifically the electric New York romance of the sky blue. Yellow was too piercing, too jarring, too muddy, too artificial, too smelly, too nerdy, too squinty, too docile, too chinky. And yeah, so that's like the first section or page or
Mhm.
so.
So when I read this, it was just really, really touching to me, and I felt like it's like top three things that I've read in my life.
Thank
So,
you.
how long did it take you to like craft this piece of writing, and like what was like your thought process, and what was your
Mhm.
inspiration behind writing?
So in high school, my senior year, I took this was actually junior year. Took
Mhm.
a creative nonfiction class like in the spring. And the way the class worked is like you draft, it's kind of like how it works in like college workshops, which is pretty cool. You draft like one piece, and every class we would like take turns workshopping, and people would present their pieces and we discuss. And it was usually like one longer piece that everyone talked about. So um, I wasn't sure what exactly I wanted to write about initially, but then like this was like during COVID, it was like after like 2020 and like the Stop Asian Hate movement and everything. And I'd done a lot of reflecting, and I realized like this was something that I was interested in doing some introspection about, writing about. So it took like, I'd say it took like about a couple of weeks for the first draft. Um,
Mhm.
but revising it was definitely like a bit of a process, just because
Mhm.
like that's kind of what's emphasized in classes like that, I think. And I'd say like about a month overall in terms of like start to finish. Because I remember I wanted to be one of the first people to like workshop so I
Mhm.
could get it over with. So I
Mhm.
did it like earlier on.
Yeah, but yeah, you finished this essay, well, a month, but I think that's still a fairly short amount of time. So and I could really feel like how heartfelt your message was. So would you like to like relay that message to our audience today, and what exactly was your goal with this piece?
Yeah. So like this piece was sort of like me reflecting on my identity as an Asian American and like
Mhm.
growing up Asian American and moving from a more diverse, like Asian heavy elementary and middle school to a more primarily white institution.
Mhm.
And it's very interesting because I grew up in San Francisco, which is like one of the biggest
Yeah,
Asian American populations in the
yeah.
United States. So I think like growing up, I didn't struggle in a way that a lot of Asian Americans did, such as like my parents. Both of them were like some of the only Asian people like in their entire schools, whereas like they were the like where I went to school, Asian people were the majority or like a significant portion of the population. And when I got to high school, I definitely feel like when I started thinking about like who I am as an Asian American, I started realizing that like people treat you a little bit differently. Like you're pigeonholed in stereotypes in the way that you might not be when you're around a lot of other Asian Americans. And I definitely had trouble socializing in high school, like compared to middle and elementary school. But I don't know that I realized that was a factor until, say,
Mhm.
COVID, for example. That was like when I started learning more about Asian American history and reading more Asian American literature. And that's when I realized like that race has something to do with that, to a more like explicit degree. Um, and the piece itself, it's sort of like a reflection on Asian American identity. It's also a reflection on Asian American masculinity, just because I don't know. I think like Asian American men are in this interesting space where you're almost like emasculated, like in a way, not necessarily to like a harmful degree always, but I think like um, you have to like fight a little bit harder to be seen and to be taken seriously in social
Right.
situations. And that was something that I
Absolutely.
noticed when I went to school.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, just like I think earlier on, being Asian was something that I didn't notice as much, and it wasn't something that I was aware of. And as I grew older, it definitely became like in high school, especially, it was something that I became acutely aware of. And I know that that's like definitely a privileged thing to not notice that in the first
Mhm.
like 10 or so 10 to 13 years of your life, but yeah, it was me grappling with that, I'd say.
Mhm. So would you say that the event that caused you to have this revelation that, I'm Asian American, and I need to like try it even harder is like COVID, and how everything was separated, and there were like a surge in anti-Asian American hate crimes.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember like vividly like when um the incident happened in like San Francisco. This was like in a neighborhood not far away from me when like
Mhm.
an Asian man was like killed after being like body slammed. I remember being like, wow, like that's like something that's happening really close to me. And this is, a city with a lot of Asian Americans. It's supposed to feel very safe. And it almost like shatters that perception. And it was definitely a wake up call for me because obviously, like when you're young, you don't know as much about racism, but like I think that like was what caused me to go beyond like the simple level of like, okay, racism is a thing that exists and it's a thing that affects me to like, okay, here's how it affects me, here's how people see me, and this is like the space that like Asian Americans occupy in our world. And that year I started going to my school's AAPI group more often. I started like looking like following like online resources that were talking about like ways to help like stop Asian hate movement and stuff like that. And I think yeah, that definitely marks a shift when I wanted to be involved. I became both more aware and more passionate about helping the Asian American community.
Mhm. So what exactly was your high school like? So it was a majority white high school, right?
Yeah, it was like it was an independent, majority white, like
Mhm.
fairly wealthy high school, I would say. And it was definitely like a privilege to be able to go there just because they had a lot of resources for me.
Right.
Like the academic curriculum was very impressive. But I do think like socially it was a little bit of a struggle just because there were a decent amount of Asian Americans, but not nearly as many as like when I was in elementary or middle school. Like I'd say um, more than like my parents had. My dad said he was like one of five people in
Mhm.
like a class of like 600 or something like that. So nowhere near
Yeah.
that, but still, I would say like I would guess like 10%, maybe a little bit less.
Mhm.
Um, and also there was a very significant mixed white and Asian population, which was kind of interesting. I think that's like that might be a uniquely San Francisco thing, but I'm not sure. But I would say that it almost like I remember feeling like people at that school initially would talk to me as if like I didn't know how to socialize. Like it was almost like they were, sort of testing the waters. Like, is this like a nerd or is this like someone who's
Yeah.
like knows how to talk to people? Um, which is kind of weird because I don't know that I never had like that conversation with the other Asian guys in my grade, but I wonder if they experienced the same thing. Um, so I almost felt like I had to turn it up and like pretend not to care as much just because
Mhm.
I feel like when you're Asian American, you're pigeonholed a lot more. You're either the Asian nerd or the Asian jock or the Asian blah blah blah, and it's harder to occupy multiple spaces at once. Um,
Yeah.
there was a lot of there was a good amount of like caring about a lot of like social justice work at our school. I think because it's like in San Francisco and that's big, and that was something I really did appreciate. But I think like the stuff I struggled with more was on a lower level, like people acting like slightly differently towards you. And it's not like you can say like this person was racist or like this person was saying like was acting racist towards me. But there's like a culture that's created there. I think that can make it a little bit hard, especially because you can't really pinpoint as much.
Right. Yeah, but also like you said in your article in your essay, I think there's a part where it's like you have to choose to dive like head in first into like one of the stereotypes, like nerd Asian or sporty Asian or hockey Asian. I
Yeah.
think those. But like, did you ever feel like an outsider? You had a sense of an urge to belong and sometimes even to change yourself to belong?
Yeah, for sure. Like um I think that's something that a lot of like not even just Asian kids, but a lot of kids go through, just like feeling
Yeah.
like you have to change who you are to fit in. But
Mhm.
I think like yeah, I think high school was one of the first times where I really felt like I had to um, act like I wasn't I had to like switch up my personality a bit. I would say I'm a pretty introverted person. I would like turn it on a lot just like
Mhm.
in an effort to make friends because I feel like if you're kind of quiet, people are gonna assume like you're face in the book, like doesn't socialize kind of person, like as an Asian American. So that was something I realized like subconsciously that I needed to avoid. I don't think I realized it like I was able to vocalize like why exactly I was doing that before. Um I would also like I remember I would I would occasionally like intentionally give wrong answers in class because
Damn.
when it was like participation. So it wasn't like oh like when a teacher like asked a question, it wasn't like I was losing points or anything, but I
Mhm.
definitely felt like I didn't want to be seen as a nerd. I wanted to be
Yeah.
like I don't know if I wanted to be cool, but I didn't want people to think like this is the person we go to for homework answers and this is not the
Yeah.
person we invite to parties or whatever.
Yeah, like there was such a strong urge to reject that kind of like stereotype that people place on Asians,
Yeah,
and you had to
exactly.
like not be that person. You had to like prove yourself. Like I'm not that person. I'm cool and everything. But like
Mhm.
it's kind of tiring sometimes, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So when I was talking to you over Instagram about your piece, you told me you had this like obligation that you felt to write this piece to tell more people about your experience. Can you talk a little bit about where your sense of obligation came from?
Yeah, I think it's just like I want other like Asian Americans, and especially like Asian American boys, to like read through something like this and feel
Hmm.
seen. Just because, like, I don't know. I didn't read a lot of Asian American literature growing up. Like, I think there's a lot more now, but when I was like, you know, in elementary school, there wasn't that much of it, at least like comparatively. And specifically about like the Asian American experience, I think it's very delicate and it's subtle, and a lot of like the struggles you face, it's hard to vocalize. Like I like wasn't able to like, it took me like years to like figure out how to put it into words, like how I felt like as an Asian American, and what I was trying to do, and how I felt like I had to change. And I think reading something like that, it can be very helpful, like to see that you're not alone, or this is someone who's like gone through something similar or dealt with something similar or grown up in a similar situation, and having it put into words like that can help. And also, I'm just like a big reader. I love to read, and I always have loved to read. And I think like I almost felt like I've read so much, like now it's my turn to create. That was part of what compelled me to write, not just like Asian American literature, but like write things in general. And writing this piece was definitely like taking my newfound interest in writing, which sort of started in middle school, I would say, and using it to say like, to maybe like help people who read it feel a little bit less alone.
You talked about the want to feel seen, and I think that's a big problem right now, especially for Asian American and especially for Asian American boys, because we're always depicted in a way either we're a nerd, we're undesirable, or we're just not there. So why do you think it's so important? Actually, why do you want to be seen, and why do you think it's important for more Asian American and Asian American boys to be seen?
Yeah, I think like one of the main benefits of seeing it in like media or in books or in movies, any sort of media, is that that's like so impactful on people growing up, and also just people in general, like your perception of Asian Americans. And I think like part of why like Asian Americans have that stereotype of being like nerds or being like not like masculine or anything like that is because of how it was depicted in the media. It's sort of circular in that way. I recently read, this is the second time I've read it, but I read Interior Chinatown for a class by Charles Yu. And that is a fantastic book about like identity, and it follows this character, and it's sort of like in a mixed screenplay format, but it talks about like how as an Asian man, the roles you can play are like obedient Asian son, and the dream role is like kung fu guy. And that was like, because that's like the only way Asian American men were depicted in like a positive light, is like as a kung fu master. So I think having good representation is just so important, so you can see that like Asian Americans are just like, you know, they're Americans too, and we're people too, and we're just as diverse in personality and interests as everyone else. So reading pieces like both about racism, just because that's relevant, but also pieces that aren't about racism, just like stories with Asian American characters is important. I think like there's been a big resurgence in like Asian American in movies specifically, like with Everything Everywhere All at Once, winning Best Picture, and like Minari being nominated. Things like more Asian American actors and actresses, I think, are like fighting roles, and that just makes me really happy to see, because I feel like it helps people recognize that Asian Americans are people just like everyone else, and not the stereotype.
Yeah. Also, American Born Chinese. You know, the book by Dylan
Yes,
Young.
I was like, oh, I'm like waiting till summer to watch it.
Yeah, the Disney series is coming out, so y'all should check it out.
That graphic novel's so good. So I'm like really excited to see it.
Actually, I read it for humanities class for freshman year, and I had such a hard time understanding it at first. But then I feel like as I grew up and like I was more in tune with like my own identity and my identity struggles, I was like, damn, this hit hard, you know.
Yeah, it's so good, and like I'm really excited to like, I'm waiting till I get back so I don't like get distracted while finals happening. But yeah, I'm so excited.
Yeah. How would you describe like the impact of seeing someone that's like you in books or the media? Like, why do you think that's so important?
I think like it's almost this idea that like you can do it too. Like, you know, like reading books, like growing up, if you see white characters who are like astronauts, doctors, actors, actresses, comedians, singers, that's like, it almost feels like that's something reserved for white people if it's um, just like that's the only people you're seeing on TV, that's the only people you're reading about. Um, it'd be nice if it was like, oh, like color doesn't matter, like just because it's white person doesn't mean like you can't do it also, but that's not the world we occupy. The world we occupy is one where with a long history of racism, and being able to see yourself in different roles is not a privilege that basically all people of color have been afforded. And I think as a child, like it's very important that they are exposed to um, people of their race and sharing their identity in different jobs, especially ones that aren't commonly depicted, like an Asian American seeing like in like Hollywood, like seeing someone be an actor or an actress. Like I know like that's something I didn't see a lot growing up. I don't even know if I knew that there were like prominent Asian American actors and actresses. So I think that's like very important.
Mhm. Yeah, let's circle back a little bit to yellow is not a flattering color. You
Mhm.
ended your essay with I wish I loved yellow. And I think that was a really interesting way to like end it because you talked about how you liked yellow and then you stopped liking it and then you want to like go back to liking it. I don't know if like yellow is used as a connotation for like your Asian American identity. I think a little bit, at least that was like my understanding, but 1,000 people, 1,000 different Hamlets.
Yeah.
So yeah, can you like talk a little bit about like your own thought process of creating the piece and the little like different details and how you use them to like achieve your message?
Yeah, I think like yellow was definitely a metaphor for me, and I think it was a really
Mhm.
interesting one because growing up, yellow was my favorite color. I was like notorious for that. I feel like I would always like color things yellow just because I
Mhm.
really liked it. Um, and yeah, the story about the house is true. When we moved into that house, my parents were like, "It's a yellow house, like you'll love it." I was like, "Yes, like it's yellow." I was so excited. Um, and then I feel like growing up, being like having like different aspects of my Asian American identity were things I was extremely proud of. Or like I love to tell people about. We had like I remember a lot of Asian snacks we grew up eating. Um, my elementary school, it was Chinese immersion, so we got to walk in the New Year parade, and that was super cool. Um, and I think like after I like got into high school when it was a lot less Asian, that wasn't stuff I talked about as much. I don't think I had that sort of pride because when people treat you a little bit differently because you're Asian American, you start to see that as like a negative. And I think that's a lot of what the piece explores, like that dissonance between this is something I used to be proud of, but it's not something that other people around me are seeing and being impressed by or interested in. And yeah, I think like having the color yellow as that metaphor really like I don't know, maybe I got lucky that like my favorite color was yellow, but also because like yellow is a term sometimes like derogatorily used like
Mhm.
to refer to Asian Americans.
Mhm.
Um so that sort of like was what shaped the piece for me. And yeah, like I don't know, I don't use yellow as much anymore just because it's not like a very clear color, like it doesn't show up as much. But
Mhm.
um I guess I do wonder if like subconsciously the idea of like yellow being referred to used to refer to Asian Americans like had an impact on that. But
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, but I just felt like there was this one sentence at the first page where you're like, my teacher told me not to use it because yellow usually doesn't show on white paper. And I was like, damn, like that is so good. And some like maybe it was subconscious, like maybe it wasn't by design, but I just felt like it really hit hard. So yeah. And you talked about how you were like starting off like really proud of your identity, which is at the first part of the essay, you really like the color yellow. So what was like your deepest connection with your own Asian American Asian identity in your Asian American identity, the Asian part?
Mhm. Yeah, I think as like a child, you're not like, oh, I'm proud to be Asian, just because that's like I think it's less like explicit than that. But yeah, going to like a Chinese immersion school was definitely it. I There were like a lot of um Asian kids there. It was actually a fairly diverse school. Like it wasn't just like Asian
Mhm.
kids. There were a lot of different races represented. But we learned Chinese. We learned a lot about Chinese culture as well. I remember we would march in the Chinese New Year parade and do like a ribbon dance. Like that was one thing we did. And like, no, I remember in like, it was like kindergarten or first grade or something, like it's like taped on TV. So every kid's like so excited to get to like see yourself on TV. And they zoomed in on my face in one of them. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. And like, I remember feeling like really proud in that moment. And I think like, since like doing the reflecting in high school, I've started to, have more pride in it and be more in tune with my Asian American identity. And I think like I'm pretty happy with the place I reached in terms of being proud of who I am.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you also talked a little bit about like after you went to a less diverse high school and people questioned you and people doubted you and people like harmed you because of your Asian American identity. And it's really easy to lose track and lose touch with the Asian part of the Asian American identity. So what do you think we can do as like Asian American youth to still have a strong connection with our Asian identity, even at times when like it might lead to harms?
Yeah, I definitely think like for me, like the most helpful thing I did was just being around other Asian Americans. I think there's like just like a subconscious level of comfort that you feel like when you're around people who share your race.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's definitely not something that everyone can do. Like that's definitely a big privilege that I was able to do that. Because like living in San Francisco, like yeah, both my parents grew up in like more suburban towns, I think. So that wasn't something that they were able to do as much, but both of them had like childhood friends who were Asian that I think they're still friends with. And I think that's very valuable. And the other thing is just talking about it, like be like having the courage to talk about your experiences and talk about the struggles you might face. That allows you to figure out like, first of all, it allows you to find other people that have gone through like something similar, and you can find community in that. And also it can help you realize like what are the changes we need to make to improve things for ourselves and also future Asian Americans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And since we're on the topic of how important a community is for us to be in touch with our own identity, do you think there's currently like a very like strong community for Asian American youth? And also like, is there a strong community for Asian American writers? And have you like been connected to other Asian American writers?
Yeah, Asian American youth, I think I'm like pretty proud of like how it's like the Asian Americans I see like even like AFI, like I think that's really cool. I didn't know that it had existed on such a large scale, but I think that's really amazing, especially for people who didn't have the resources that I did to like be able to connect with other Asian Americans and learn about Asian American identity and start working with that. I think that's really amazing. And I'm not super like in a big like the big like Twitter sphere like online writing community, but I'm kind of like I'm like a little bit involved in it. And there's a lot of Asian American writers there, and I've actually read like a lot of really cool pieces by Asian American writers, and it's really like heartwarming to see that there are creatives like that out there as well.
I see Karen here is asking a question. So basically what we'll do is we have a set list of questions for Matt. And after we go through that, we'll open up to the audience questions, and we'll open up the questions to the field. So just sit tight and we'll get to your question. Okay, let's circle back a little bit about like, what do you think writing can be used as a tool for change? Because you talk about how, because you saw all the people that look like you in writing and literature and media, you were able to have a better sense of your own identity. So how do you think we can use writing as a tool for change? And especially how can the Asian American community use writing as a tool for change?
Yeah, one of the things like I think is like as a reader, I think seeking out Asian American literature is really good. Just because you're supporting Asian American artists who like I think it's harder like as a person of color in a creative field to make it through just because it's not designed to be like beneficial for you. And there's so many talented Asian American writers out there, so it's super cool to read them. And as like a writer, I think one of the things I'm passionate about is obviously writing about experiences as an Asian American is important, but also writing like stories that aren't necessarily like race related, featuring like a lot of Asian Americans. I think that's like really cool too. So like I love writing like mysteries and thrillers, and usually a lot of the mysteries I read, there's like one token Asian person that gets like killed off like midway through. Um, so like when I'm writing, longer works that are like thrillers or mysteries, I want like a lot of Asian characters. And like some get killed off and some survive. And it's just so like people can see and read about Asian American characters who like it's not just about like the race that they face. It's also like they get to do cool things like go on missions and like get in battles and like do like espionage and stuff like that. I think like it shows that you are more than the racism that you face, which is like important to see.
Yeah. Since we're on the topic of like Asian American literature, as we have been, what are some of your like favorite Asian American artists or like favorite Asian American writers?
Oh, okay. So I remember like one of the writers so the book that made me really interested in writing was called When the Emperor Was Divine by Julie Otsuka. And it's about like it's a historical fiction novel about a Japanese American family who's put in the internment camp. And that was just like, it was more the way it was written, but I read that for like an English class in middle school, and I was like, wow, this is like so cool. And it like, I learned like so much about like the experience like Japanese Americans like during the war and what they went through. And it like makes you feel it in a way, like reading a book about it, that like just like I don't know, like looking through like a Wikipedia article or like a textbook can't. And I think that's what really inspired me. And that the prose in that book is so good. So I loved that. And I also remember ninth grade. Yeah, we read a couple of the stories from Jhumpa Lahiri's Interpreter of Maladies. And that is also like an amazing collection of short stories. I love the way she writes, and I like how subtle it is. I think like some people are like, oh, like she doesn't describe inner thoughts as much. It's more based on imagery, and she's not giving her characters as much agency. But I think if you like analyze it a little bit more, you can really see the nuances and the subtleties that she puts into her writing. So I remember like we only read a couple of them for the class, but I finished like all of them because I enjoyed it so much. And then I read like Unaccustomed Earth, which was her other collection, just because it was so good. So that's another one of my favorites.
Yeah. Actually, can you just in case our audience may be like curious and they want to read it from themselves, can you like write your names down in the chat or something like that so we can refer to it after? All right, great. And we actually kind of already touched on that with the last question, but what exactly ignited like your love for writing apart from When the Emperor Was Divine?
Yeah, that was one of the main things. But like growing up, I loved to read. I was one of those kids who would like go to the library and spend all day reading. We would like regularly max out the library card because we would take like so many books back. I think When the Emperor Was Divine was an example of like the more literary fiction that like got me into the craft of like making really nice prose and things like that. But things like the things that got me like really into the more actiony side or more genre literature, books like The Hunger Games or the 39 Clues series, stuff like that. That's very like action adventure. That like it transports you. Like I would read it and forget like I'm not one of the characters of the book, and I think that's one of the coolest things. And I really wanted to create works like that. Also, I see in the chat. I
I
sent it to host.
You sent it to host and panelists. You didn't. Yeah, I think you have to send it to.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go. Yep. Cool. Right. So for a lot of teenagers and like me too, writing can like be really, really daunting and really,
Mhm.
really hard. And I just
Yeah.
like never really learned to enjoy it until like I think this year. So were you always like a good writer? And what advice do you have for like kids who might struggle with writing?
Yeah, I would say like, I don't know. Growing up, like I think like evaluating like good as like, an elementary school student is like, can
Mm,
you like, are you able to write? Like that's all that matters. But
yeah.
I think the most important thing is, you know, just committing to it. I think like so many people are capable of coming up with really amazing stories and really meaningful works. And the hardest part is just, putting it down just because writing is like anything, like especially for longer works, it's an intimidating process just because it feels so long. Um, like I think my general advice is just don't I think like rules are meant to be broken. I think like I'm one of those people where it's like if you
Facts.
just because like people say like you should write this way doesn't mean you have to. Like there's lots of great writing advice out there, but you might as well experiment. There's nothing stopping you from saying like, oh, like I'll write this piece like not chronologically or something like that. Um, and I think it's like my favorite pieces I've read are the ones that explore a little and try new things. So that's my advice, just because like even if it's not good, like whatever, like you just write something else. And
Mhm,
that's my attitude towards it.
mhm. You know, when I see you talking about writing, I know we're over Zoom, but I kind of just like see how you just entirely light up as a person, and that's when you know like you just really, really love writing.
Yeah.
So like, what do you enjoy the most about writing, and how has you like changed you as a person, I guess?
Yeah, I think like I don't know, I feel like I'm just a person with like a big imagination. I love like having stories and like um conceptualizing like ideas. I've like so many different ideas for like books I'd love to write like in my head.
Mhm,
Um just like I don't know, like if like I'm in like since like I was little, like if I'm in the car and I'm bored, well, I used to read, but then I started getting car sick. So I would like think of like,
mhm. Yeah, that's true.
interesting stories. I was like, recently I was like, ooh, like a post-apocalyptic one would be really fun. Like a superhero comedy would be really fun. I think a lot of it is influenced by what I'm watching or reading at the time. But my favorite part is just being able to take the crazy, like super fun ideas I've had in my head and put them on the paper and like turn them into a story that people can read. I think that's like so cool that like you can
Mhm,
write something that people are actually going to read and love the way I loved like reading books growing up.
mhm. Yeah. JC's asking in the chat. This is actually kind of relevant to what we're talking about right now. So, did any writing classes that you've taken, did you take any writing classes? And if you did, were they helpful? And also, I guess, like my own question, like, how did you get so good at writing?
I think like yeah, so writing classes, I never did any. It was all through school. I never did anything like any online like programs. I know there's a lot of really good summer like mentorship programs that are out there. I didn't end up doing any of them actually, but I did a lot of writing through school. One of the things I really loved about the way English was taught at our school was like, you have to learn to analyze text and do close reading and all that typical stuff. But occasionally we would get like chances to, write creative pieces instead of analytical pieces. And
Mhm,
I would always choose a creative option because that was what I was interested in. And during junior and senior year, we got to pick electives, like which specific writing course do you want to take? And I would always go for the creative ones because that's what I like most. And in college, I haven't taken a creative writing workshop yet. I think I'm going to try to do one next fall if I can like get into the class because enrollment's crazy here.
mhm,
But I've taken an amazing course, probably my favorite this year, called Contemporary Asian American Stories. And I've gotten to do creative writing for my like pieces. Like I don't think it's not a workshop course, but our teacher gave us the option to do creative pieces instead of analytical pieces for essays. That's um, that's really awesome. And also like I just plug that class because it's like I've read so many cool Asian American pieces of literature.
mhm.
And then in response to your question, I think honestly just writing a lot. Like I
Yeah.
think like that's all I can like advocate for. Reading pieces on craft and you know getting like peer editing and like reading like really good works, that's all very, very helpful. But I think the most important thing you can do is just keep writing. Like from sixth grade, like I think that was when I started working on like my first like novel, quote unquote. I'd say novel in quotations because it was really short. But like I just like consistently did it like throughout throughout high school, and I think that's like what helped me is just keep going.
Mhm. Speaking of your first novel, you're actually writing like your first actual novel, I heard. What is that about? And what was like the creative process for you in writing that novel?
Mhm. Okay, so first novel, like the one that it's not like one that I'm looking to publish. It was more like just for fun thing, but I wrote it in middle
Mhm.
school. That was like just something I toyed around with. I had fun with. There were like 5 different versions, crazy long, some of them, but it was um, that was just that wasn't something I was like, oh, I'm gonna try to publish this and get it out there. Whereas this last one that I wrote throughout high school, it is a thriller mystery kind of book. It's
Mhm.
called Spiderweb. It's very twisty and turny. It's about an assassin who works for this lady, and he is assigned to kill this other person. And instead, they cut a deal to try to take down someone else. And it's about their like journey going through and like trying to complete this mission. But there's like a lot of like backstabbing and secrets that are hidden, and that's like the kind of stuff I love writing. I love intrigue and plot twists and mysteries. And I remember like when I came up with it, I was on the bus back from like a Model UN trip. So like I wrote down
Yeah.
like the idea, like I wrote down the
Yeah.
characters. I drew like a map with like on top of like some delegates like speech or something.
Yeah.
They didn't have room, and I still have that today. And like that turned into, I think it's really cool that like that random idea I had turned into 90,000 word novel. And I'm hopefully like after the school year's over and I have like more free time again, I'm gonna look into like it's almost done. I just want to like polish it really quickly and go into
Mhm.
like self-publishing it.
Mhm. Y'all remember the name Spiderweb. It's gonna be the best book you've ever read in your entire life. So yeah, but dude, that's so cool though, because I really like Eminem. I'm basic, I know, but he had this story where once he like came up with song lyrics, and he was on like he was in the car on his way home, and then the back of his car was really dusty, so he wrote something on the back of his car with his finger because it was really dusty, and he went back home and he worked with that idea, and he wrote like one of the greatest songs of all time, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. Like, how do you just get all these ideas? Like, how do you just like how do they just spawn in your head?
I have zero clue. I'm gonna be honest with you. I just like I don't know. It's just like
Yeah,
something that
just
that
happen.
that I think of. Like I just like I'm a
Mhm.
daydreamer. I like to think of like stories that sound cool or like ideas for books. And this one was just one that I came up with. I was like, I think like long bus rides help with that, just because like what
Mhm.
else are you doing at that point? And yeah, I just like thought like, oh, like an assassin story would be really cool. Like, what if there were these characters and these two had like this secret relationship and blah 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 blah. So um, it just sort of builds on that, I think.
Mhm. So what is like your writing process? You have this idea and then you build on it, and then what
Mhm.
do you do?
It actually changed a lot. Like the first novel I had, I just like there's a term called pantsing where you don't outline and you just write it, and
Mhm.
it was like a fully pants novel. Like um, one of the funniest things that happened is that I accidentally wrote the same scene in there twice, and I realized that like during revisions.
Mhm.
Um, so like that one, I just like typed it up and started writing, and I like tried to write. I remember my goal was like 500 words a day. Like for like a
Yeah.
period, I sort of like braked like during sophomore year. I think like
Mhm.
I stopped for a bit and then I like picked it back up, and eventually it got finished. Um, and this next one that I'm currently working on, that one has a ton of planning. I think after writing the first one, I realized how beneficial it is to like plan ahead of time. So like I've planned like
Mhm.
all the scenes, I've written like character descriptions, and it's like a lot more organized. So I guess like that's the evolution of my writing process right there.
Yeah. So you talked about writing 500 words every single day. Like, how long do you spend every day on writing, and like how long do you spend every day now on writing?
Mhm. Now it's a struggle. I will say that. It's like I haven't been able to write as much, and that's one of the things I'm a little disappointed by. But I also feel like I have to give myself grace because it's like my freshman year of college, and you're
Yeah,
still getting used to that kind of thing. And I'm
figuring it
really
out.
like
Yeah.
ready like for this summer. Like I'll have like 3 months, and if you write 500 words a day, that's like whatever the math is, like 45,000 words, I guess, which is like
Mhm.
pretty substantial. And I just like want to get back into it. I think like everyone going to freshman year is like it's such a big shift, like going into college that you're not able to do that as much anymore. But in
Mhm.
high school, when I was like doing it, I would say like about an hour. It wasn't exactly 500 words. It was sometimes less, sometimes more, sometimes just like stop where like I felt like the scene would conclude. Um, but yeah, I was glad I did it because I think it taught me discipline, and I think that's a skill you have to have, like as a writer, just because it's pretty easy to get distracted for sure.
Mhm. Apart from discipline, which is a great thing to have, and it's really funny how you got it from writing. That's really cool. But apart from discipline, what do you think is like your biggest learning from writing a novel?
I think like, I guess like writing a novel, I think it allows you to like reflect. I think it gives you a lot of the idea like you're thinking about this one thing so much, and you're putting so much like time and like thought, and like I could like for each of my characters I could like write like pages and pages about like who they are. Sometimes I feel like
Mhm.
I understand them better than like other people. And I just think like being able to think about one thing for like that long, that's like one of the skills it gave me. I don't know that that's a good thing. Maybe it's like a fixation, but like just understanding like how much time goes into producing like
Yeah.
a book like that, or like any sort of work of art. I think it's made me more appreciative of like um everything else that I read or watch or listen to these days.
Yeah. But all of the masterpieces come from a hyperfixation. So sometimes it's
Exactly.
definitely good to,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
very
Um,
true.
yeah, and also you talked about how when you were a reader and you were reading Asian American literature it had an impact on your life. So now that you're on the other side of this, you're no longer the reader, you're the writer. So how has being Asian American contributed to your writing, and how do you plan on, using your writing as a voice for change?
Yeah, I think one of the simplest things I can do, and I don't even think it's super challenging, it's just writing Asian American characters. Like I
Mhm.
remember actually when I first drafted Spiderweb, the main character was white, and I was like, I think like later I realized like why is like my inclination to make like mostly white characters and then like
Yeah,
one or two Asian
yeah.
characters and then
It can
like
be
one
internalized
black
sometimes.
character.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you internalize it, and I think like eventually I thought about it and I was like, well, like I don't know, I don't think I have to change the story a lot. Like I don't think it matters whether it's an Asian American or a white or a black or a Hispanic like lead.
Mhm.
Like it's not a huge impact just because the story is about like an assassin who's going around like murdering people. So that's like not super relevant because
Yeah.
it's like a thriller novel, but still like being able to read a novel about like a thriller novel about with an Asian American main character, that's very cool because like you're seeing someone who's like you in that regard. Um, and that's something like yeah, I think like a lot of Asian American writers are doing that now, and that's something that I fully intend to keep doing is to have my works feature Asian American characters, whether it's about being Asian American, whether it's
Mhm.
about like a mystery where no one knows who the killer is. Like that's what I'm committed to because that's what I would want to read,
Right.
and that's what I think it would be great for younger Asian Americans to read.
Right. Because I do think that is like incredibly important, because like the representation not only for us, it helps like Asian American kids to realize that there are people like them and that they can,
Exactly. Yeah.
be the hero. And also, it also helps like just the general public, and it helps to shape the general public's like perception of what an Asian American is, of what an Asian American boy can be, of what an Asian American girl can be. And it's really, really important in that it
Mhm.
shapes the public's view. So,
Exactly.
thank you for doing that. You're doing God's work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Let's transition a little bit to your college career. So you
Yes.
are doing mathematics and also creative writing. Like, how in the world are you managing both of them at the same time?
Yeah, I think it's like I talk about this like a lot with people, but I think like so like growing up, I was I was like a reader, obviously. I was also like a pretty big math kid. I don't know. I was
Hmm.
like they had like those 100 like times tables things, and that was like I was so good at that. I would like fly through those.
Hmm.
And like I was always interested in math. I like the aspect of it where it's logical and you're trying to solve a puzzle and you're figuring things out. Um, and one of the things I've been interested in recently is like working like mathematical concepts in creative writing, which isn't like giving your readers like homework problems, but something that like I've been toying with, like with this current novel, is it's a mystery. Um, what if like you can use like a logic puzzle to like figure out who the murderer is, like putting
Hmm.
like I like those sort of ideas like into my novels, I think is really cool because I've read novels like that and I think that's like one of the coolest things ever. Um, and also I feel like it just math engages more of my analytical side, writing engages more of my creative side, and I feel like I'm not either person. I think if I just did one, I think I would like I don't think I would like that as much because I need both to be engaged like at a certain
Hmm.
point. I remember my winter quarter, like I did take a poetry class, but I didn't really get to like write anything for any of them. And I was like, when I finally got to like write a poem, I was like, I remembered like, wow, like I need to be doing this to like keep myself sane. Um, so I think like it's both like them being in pretty different spaces, like and taking different skill sets, but also like exploring the overlap they have. Just because I think like that's one cool thing you can do is like take two subjects that seemingly don't have any overlap and exploring the overlap between them.
Yeah, because when I learned psychology, it was always one side of your brain takes care of the logics and the other side takes care of the
Mhm.
creative stuff. And math and creative writing was like one is purely logic and one is purely creative. And it's really, really
Yeah,
cool to see. It's like two different sides of the spectrum. So it's really, really
yeah,
cool to see you how you could like do those two together at the same time and make it work.
exactly.
So yeah, that's really, really cool.
For sure.
So how do you like balance your time at the same time? Because I feel like both takes like a lot of time to do.
Yeah, I think like um just like the English classes I've taken here,
Mhm.
generally, like I'm gonna be honest, they've generally had a lighter workload. I took like a pretty I took like the harder math. There's like two math tracks, and I did take the harder one this year, so that
Mhm.
took up a lot of my time. And I'm a little sad because I think like I haven't really had that much time to write this year, or I just like haven't been able to have the time management skills to like work it in the same way I did in high school. But you know, I think like I'm like a lot more situated now, and like next year I'll be a lot more prepared to like keep doing those things. And the other thing is that creative writing courses here, or even some English classes, lots of opportunities to write. Any sort of creative writing class, you'll be writing like um, there's like you write a short story, you could write like several poems for the workshop classes. There's even a novel one here, which like I kind of want to try taking. Like I think that would be cool, just because that would. I feel like if something's for a class, I'm like more inclined to do it. In high school, like I would only write once I finished all my homework because
Mhm.
that like has a due date. um, but yeah, I mean, time management is something every college student struggles with. So
Yeah,
I'm still like finding that answer myself, I think.
that's true. That's true. So with the two things that you're doing right now, what do you
Mhm.
plan on, like what do you see your career being and how do you think you can, are you gonna do both at the same time? Are you gonna focus on one? Are you gonna like what do you plan
Mhm.
your career to be?
Yeah, honestly, we're still figuring that out. I don't
Yeah,
even technically
as
know what I'm gonna
expected.
major
That's
in
fair.
yet,
That's fair. Yeah.
because it's like, because like, I mean, you don't have to major in something to like take the classes in it. Like that's not
Right.
what's important.
Right.
Um, I would love to do both. I'm like, or like I could like, I think math is more associated with um like a day job, quote unquote, whereas writing is more associated with freelance work or like
Mhm.
not like as like significant a 9 to 5. But so like I would love to be able to like do one during the day and do one like write as like a more freelance job or something like in my other hours. But honestly, no clue yet. So we're gonna see how it turns out.
Yeah, but do you like, because usually when you apply to college, you're like, what major do you want to do? What career do you want to do? Like they ask you a bunch of questions like that. And I'm just like, you know what? I don't even know what I want to do yet. And that's what I'm supposed to do, like in college, that's what I'm supposed to figure out in college. Do you
Mhm.
feel the same for you? Like college is there for you to figure out what you really want to do?
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I would hate to be in this like position like 3 years from now and be like, well, I still have no idea what I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
But I think like, yeah, if you're like, you spend a lot more time learning. In high school, you have a
Mhm.
more shallow like treading of the material, whereas in college you dive a lot deeper. So I think you have a lot more opportunities to figure out what you want to do. And also you're spending a lot more time on it in college. So you're like, okay, this
Mhm.
is something that I do want to pursue like afterwards. Um, so I think like I'm having the mindset like I'm in my discovery stage, and you don't want to put too much pressure on yourself just because,
Right.
I think most people don't know what they want to do, like specifically when they leave college.
Right. Let's talk about your college experience and this college you're going to, which is Stanford.
Yeah. Mhm.
What's your favorite part and what's your least favorite part about your freshman year at Stanford?
Okay. Favorite part, honestly, it's hard to pick like a specific thing. I think just,
You can pick like three things if you want,
yeah,
honestly.
okay, well, just like meeting new people and making new
Mhm.
friends has been so, so cool.
Mhm.
Stanford's very heavily California, so there are a lot of us here, but because I'm from California as well. But
Mhm.
a lot of people from like Midwestern states or East Coast states that you don't really
Yeah.
grow up with, or
Ohio.
especially like international students. Like there's a lot of like people from different countries that like you also don't really meet in high school, so that's
Yeah.
really awesome. And you spend, I think, a lot more time with your friends. Like I lived like decently far away from my high school, so I didn't really like hang out with people after school that much, but like here
Mhm.
you're like with them 24/7, so you get really close and it's a lot of fun. And also just like I think you work I have to work a lot harder here to like really understand things, but the material that you get to choose what you want to study. So it's like I've like mostly enjoyed like all of my classes so far. Um just because it's stuff that I picked and it's stuff that I'm interested in, and
Mhm.
um it's like a lot more interesting than high school. And then least favorite thing, okay, I have like never gotten sick so much in my life, but I get sick here so much. And like when people ask me like, what was the hardest part of your first quarter? I'm like, well, it was probably that I was like sick for like half of my first quarter here, and just like I don't know. I think it's like everyone's getting used to new pathogens or whatever, so like
Yeah.
everyone's sick all the time. Like when people ask me, I would say like that was my biggest struggle. It wasn't like the new environment or that workload. It was like literally being sick all the time.
Mhm.
Um, and then I'd also say like it can be like a little bit um actually I kind of like the independence aspect. I was gonna say like it can feel a little bit isolating, but I feel like I'm a pretty independent person. So I like being able to like manage my schedule and everything.
Mhm.
Um, but it is like a big change, and I think everyone struggles with it to some extent.
Mhm. How would you describe Stanford's culture? And you talked a little bit about like independence. Do you think that's a big part, or
Yeah, I
how would you
think,
describe it? Yeah.
yeah. I mean Stanford's culture I'd say is like it's pretty techy. I will say that. Like if you're
Mhm.
not like if
I mean,
that
it's
like
right
turned
next
you
to
off,
Silicon Valley, so
yeah.
that's to be expected.
But like, yeah, I've been taking computer science classes too. Just I feel like if I was at another school, I would not be taking that necessarily. But
Mm.
I think like just like that sort of culture has definitely pushed me like in that direction somewhat. Like the biggest like the biggest class like this spring is like one of the CS courses I'm in, which has like 700 people, um, which is like pretty wild. And I'd say like there's been discussion, like there's been this thing called Stanford hates fun, like people like protesting because like admin is shutting down like activities and stuff. Which like I do like understand. Like I think there's like some administrative issues that like I we don't need to get into, but I think there is like a good work hard, play hard culture here, which I really like because I think like a lot of people here are very hardworking. a lot of weeknights, like my friends and I will go to the dining hall near us and, hang out and study and do whatever. Sometimes we'll go to the late night option and get like French fries and milkshake, which is a lot of fun. And
That
then
sounds
also
fun.
like, once the work is done, you can go out and it's so nice outside.
Yeah.
My parents are like, you would not survive East Coast weather. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I would never. But yeah, like today I had to like work on an essay, which made me really sad because outside everyone was like playing. So
Yeah. Funny thing, I'm actually going to Stanford's Humanities Institute this summer,
oh, nice.
and it's also about like more humanities focus, and you already go there. So I was just wondering if you had like any advice for me on how to like survive my 3 week Stanford experience.
Yeah, I've actually never heard of this before. I've heard of like they have a lot of summer programs at Stanford.
Yeah, they do.
But yeah, I think humanities is interesting here because there's a pretty dominant STEM culture, I would say. But I also think like within the humanities, there's like a really nice community. Like in my English classes, it's been very, very tight knit, especially compared to my other ones. So I think that's one of the benefits is, you grow close with the people in your major, in your field of study in humanities, and also you get a lot more interaction with like professors and stuff, just because there's a ton of resources and not as many students in that area. But yeah, I would say like, I don't know, bring allergy medicine because
Real.
I don't think my allergies have never been worse since they've been here. But like, yeah, just like enjoy the nice weather. It'll be so nice like this summer and learn a lot.
Actually, this is definitely a myth, where it actually might not be a myth. I don't know, but there's this thing that at Stanford, everything is taught by TAs because all the professors are working on something else. Do you think that's true, or is that just a myth?
No, I think that's a rumor. I have not had a TA led class yet, and
Okay.
I don't really know of many classes that are TA taught.
Okay.
So yeah, actually, I remember my aunt warned me. She's like, "Yeah, I heard at like Stanford, a lot of TAs like teach, and the professors have to do research, but all of mine have been like very professor forward. So that's been very nice."
Do you think you have a lot of chances to like interact with your professor and build like a deeper relationship?
Yes, that's something I want to get better at. Is like
Mhm.
being like interacting with them more.
Yeah, me too.
I think like office hours, specifically for math, have really helped with that because I've relied on office hours a lot because math classes are hard. But yeah, I've definitely like forged a stronger relationship, and I know a lot of people who like are doing research over the summer, which they did just by like cold emailing professors, or like talking to professors that like they took classes with. I think it's harder in big departments like computer science, but um, the professors here that I've had have all been really amazing. So I'd love to get to like connect with them more.
And just before we move on to audience questions, do you have any like final thoughts you want to share with us about like either writing or Stanford or Asian American representation in media, or just about anything that you want to share?
Yeah. Honestly, I don't know. I didn't really prepare like conclusive thoughts
No
like that.
worries.
I just think
Just think out loud. Yeah.
yeah, just like, you know, Asian Americans write some really cool literature. And I think like as Asian Americans, we all have like the capability to write some really cool literature. And I think it's important to never feel like you're not able to do it you don't like just because you're not as familiar with it or you don't think you can. I think just like having that confidence, whether it's like delusional or not, it's like that's the best thing you can have just because you got to do it
Yeah.
and you got to show yourself that you can do it.
Yeah. Don't set limits. Don't set limits. I cannot
Exactly.
talk tonight. Yeah, but don't set limits for yourself because you never know what you can do until you start doing it.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
all right, W message. So let's move on to some of the audience questions. So, I think from Karen, can you let us know a little bit more about your math activities?
Yeah, I didn't do like so in high school. I skipped like a couple math classes. My school didn't have like a math we might have had a math team. It was like pretty small though. So
Mhm.
I actually didn't do that much like competition math or a lot of the things that a lot of like potential math majors do. But yeah, I like self-studied some of the courses and stuff like that. And in college, I've become like a lot more into it just because it's a lot more theoretical, which I just think is a lot more interesting. Your math is so diverse, and there's so many different subjects you could take. So I definitely spend a lot of time on my math classes each week. Um, and I've tried to get involved with like the undergraduate math organization. They have like socials and stuff. And one of the other activities is like um, one of my other activities is like a Stanford math tournament. They like host a math tournament for high schoolers, and that's like another way to just meet people in the major. But I think like
Mhm.
honestly, the thing that I do the most is just doing math, like with friends or like PSET partners, and
Mhm.
that's like an enjoyable process.
Do you just like enjoy doing math problems?
Yeah, like I think it's fun. Um,
Mhm.
I think
No,
there's
I
times when
respect
it's
that, bro.
like
I respect that. I can never.
there's times when it's like I would rather not be doing this, but like when
Mhm.
it's like interesting, I think like it's very very beautiful. Like that sort of logical, almost story like aspect of it can be very
Yeah,
cool.
I respect that, bro. Like the appreciation that you have
Yeah,
for math is like so respectable, bro.
yeah. I know it's not everyone's
Cool.
thing, but
Yeah, from TJ Lee. What experience in your childhood shaped your love for writing, apart from what we already talked about?
honestly, yeah, I think it's just reading. I loved reading. I loved adventure books and like children like play pretend and stuff. I think like my friends and I or my brother and I would pretend to be spies. I think that was a big one. I loved like
Hmm.
spies and stuff like that. But just being able to immerse yourself in another world like I was able to do with books and literature is what made me eventually want to start like making those worlds myself. And that's what and writing was like how, oh, this is how I can do that.
Hmm. And our next question is from Helen. How did you present yourself in your college application essay about your interest in both math and literature? And did you already decide at that time to major in both math and writing, or are you still trying to figure that out?
I never knew. Like for colleges, like when I put down intended major, I put down like both like math and writing, when possible. Um, just because like most of them had that option, and I was just like, I don't know, and like I don't think they necessarily expect you don't have to commit really. Like I didn't really apply to any schools like that. So I would say so. My Common App essay was about like the novel. Actually, that was what that was about. But I had this one essay that I wrote and I used for a bunch of different schools, um, which I highly encourage doing. By the way, it'll save you a lot of time. Um, but it was like any school with the question about like what's something you're passionate about, what's something that like makes your wheels spin. Um, is
Mhm.
like I talked about the intersection of math and creative writing. Um, and like you know, that sort of I talked about the novel I'm writing with the logic puzzles, ciphers, stuff like topology even you could use to like think about devices or like codes. Um, and yeah, that was like probably my favorite of the ones I wrote just because it's very genuine to what I want to do. I really love like taking like mathematical ideas and putting them into my writing to like give it that unique like technical flair. Um, so I would say that's how I was able to like sort of blend it into both. And I use that essay like basically wherever possible because almost all the schools had like some prompt that was similar, including
Mhm.
Stanford.
Mhm. Actually, talking about essay writing, I'm a
Mhm.
junior in high school, so that means this entire summer I'm gonna be writing like 30 essays.
Mhm.
Um, what advice do you have for the juniors out there who are struggling with college essays? And how do you write
Yeah,
a good college essay?
definitely like, actually, I don't know if this is like, if I would do this again. I wrote my Common App essay first, and that was what I
Mhm.
mostly did over the summer. Um, And I'm starting to wonder, like, maybe it would have been better to write other ones first, just so I was like more in tune with the process. But um, I do think everyone's like get started early, and they are not lying, because I don't know how many schools like people are applying to, but the earlier you start, the better. I think like staying organized, having a checklist of like what you need to write, and then reusing essays is like was like the biggest time saver for me. Just because like there's only so many prompts they can ask, and anything that's not like school specific will usually show up at least once or twice in like other essays. So um, that's more of like a logistical suggestion, I would say. The
Mhm.
actual writing, I just think there's a lot of resources out there who can probably help you better than I can, because I'm not like a college admissions advisor or officer or anything, but just like um, just like being yourself and showing who you are truly, I think is what you can do.
Mhm. Oh, we got three more questions. So first from Yan, that do you have any identity issues when you grow up? So I'm assuming this will most likely be like high school days, right?
Yeah, like I mentioned, like it was, I would say more in high school than anything else. And when I was younger, I think my parents like decided to like we lived in South San Francisco for a bit, which is like close to
Mhm.
San Francisco, but just the Bay Area in general, I think they, that was some place that they really wanted to like raise their children in, just to be around other Asian people. And that's like definitely a privilege that's not lost on me, that I didn't have to think about that as early as some other Asian Americans. But I like I really loved being around other Asian people and being immersed in that culture. And yeah, like earlier, high school was like a little bit of a it was a little bit of a culture shock for me. And I think that's when I started to like feel a little bit like more insecurity in terms of my identity. But
Mhm.
I think just like once I really looked in the mirror and thought about and like became aware of like the issues that Asian Americans face, that's when I was like, you know what, this is something I'd rather be proud of than ashamed of. And it's
Mhm.
not my problem if other people don't see it the same way.
Yeah, but that's really cool though, because usually when you encounter troubles with like your identity and you feel like other people are harming you because of it, instead of saying like I gotta be proud of my identity, people are like I gotta escape from my identity so that other people
Mm-hmm.
don't see me as Asian, so they no longer like target me and attack me. So like I gotta be white, I gotta assimilate, I gotta stop being Asian. So like
Mm-hmm.
where did you where did you find not only like the reason but also the courage to say to other people like, you know what, if you harm me, if you are racist, basically that's your fault, that's not my fault, I'm going to be proud of my identity. Like how did you find the courage to do that?
I'd say like yeah, in during like 2020 when the Asian hate crimes were happening, I saw a lot of mobilization and a lot of Asian American activists being like, this is who we are and we're going to fight to keep ourselves safe and to keep our people safe and to make sure
Mhm.
that like the stuff that we're enduring is like not going to scare us away. And I was really moved by that, and I felt like that's what I want to be like. I want to be someone who is unapologetic about their identity, and it's something
Mhm.
that they're proud of. And I think that's something I wanted to emulate, and they taught me how to emulate.
Mhm. So you saw like the people fighting for like the
Yeah.
perseverance of their own identity and you were really inspired by that, so you decided that you
Yeah.
wanted to do the same.
And I
Okay.
love what like Alliance for Impact does with that as well. So I think
Mhm.
that's what you guys do is super cool.
Thanks.
Keep it
Thanks.
up.
Yeah. Um, Here from Grady Goo, I gotta say, I love your I love your initials, Grady. Like GG are top tier initials. Grady is saying, should we use ChatGPT to help us with our application essays? Ooh, spicy.
Honestly, well, I mean, that was not a thing when I was like writing my application
Yeah,
essays. So
fair.
something like actually, interestingly enough, my English professor right now for the Asian American Stories class was like at the beginning of the quarter, he said chat gpt is like going to be, well, not just chat gpt but AI is going to be like a part of our lives growing up, like not growing up in the future. And like if that's something like maybe it can help you like brainstorm for the creative process. He was like, if like if you can use like chat gpt to help you brainstorm, as long as you're not just like copying and pasting something they wrote. And I think that's like interesting, because I'm like, how is it going to affect writers? Like maybe like using it to brainstorm, if you say like this is what I'm interested in, like what like, what do you think like I could write about? I don't know if it would be good at that. I haven't really tried it myself, but you know, it's you might as well like see like what it can do. I think there's like, I mean, Stanford's one of the biggest hubs of AI like in the world. So I'm gonna be learning a lot about it here, I think. So, you know, maybe try it. Like the writing itself that it does. I've asked it to like write me a story and it was like really bad and boring, but maybe like it could help with brainstorming or something.
Mhm. All right. Yeah, that's actually my experience with ChatGPT too. Like, I can't rely on it to generate like the entire thing for me, but I can use it as a tool to help me with like my own process. So I just say like don't rely on it completely and just like use it as a tool. But I've also not started on writing my college essays. So
Mhm.
I might not be the best one to go to for an answer, but just offering my own perspective.
Yeah.
Here from Sydney, she's also asking about the identity issues, which we've covered. And she's also asking, which generation Asian American are you in your family? So I guess that's like, when did your ancestors move
Mhm.
to the United States?
So I consider myself second gen more
Mhm,
because, well, actually, it's kind of weird because sometimes it can be like some people say first gen means you are the immigrant, and some say you're the child of the immigrant. I think generally it's the latter at this point.
mhm,
But yeah, my grandparents all immigrated, and my dad's side immigrated from Taiwan, and my mom's side immigrated from Korea.
mhm,
And my dad moved to the U.S. when he was like 14 months old, and my mom was born in the US like right after they arrived. So I would say like because my dad grew up in the US, I would say second generation, even though he wasn't born like inside the US. And I think like I have a lot of respect for um, what they went through, just because you know it was very different. Their experience growing up was very very different from mine, and I
mhm,
think a lot of like the struggles they faced, I'm fortunate enough to not have faced that as well. But that also doesn't stop like there from being identity issues, just
mhm.
because, you know, even if you're privileged enough to like grow up in a place where there are Asian Americans, it's still like something you're inevitably going to have to notice because it's not like that everywhere.
Mhm. To answer your question, Cindy, I'm actually, and I guess I consider myself a first gen because technically, even though my parents like moved here when they were in like college, they moved back and then they had me, and then we like together with my family, we moved here in 2019. So technically, I'm a first gen, but yeah, but still, even when you like lived in another country for a long time and you're really in tune with the culture and you know the history and everything, there could still be like identity issues simply because there's no one else like you and you feel the urge to belong and you feel it and you're feeling like, I got to change who I am to fit in. And then that's when the identity issues kick in. Like you feel like maybe if I'm less Asian, maybe if I
Mhm.
assimilate more, I can get rid of all my problems. But then I start to realize that I can't. So then that's when you really start to embrace your Asian American identity, which is, I think, also resonates with what Matt said before. So B Lin is asking, any summer programs you would recommend for high school students who love creative writing?
Yeah, I didn't. Okay, so my year was like my sophomore and junior summers were like the COVID summers, so everything was online then. And I think like that was also what I started learning about like programs like the Iowa program. There's one in Iowa. There's one
Mhm,
in like I think there's another one. I don't remember exactly, but like basically, I didn't want to do any of them like online. I was like, if I'm not going to go, I'd rather like not do it. I think a lot of what I did is just a lot of I did a lot of I didn't do a lot of like organized workshops actually or like programs. It was more um just my own writing whatever I felt like. And doing literary magazine editing, I think is a lot of fun. I'm doing it right now. I'm with a journal called Kissing Dynamite, and that's a poetry journal actually, but I just love like reading all the things that people submit and being able to discuss them. So that's like what I recommend. It's like as high or low commitment as you want generally like with those journals because some like are more involved than others. Um, and I also can't speak to things like the Adroit mentorship program. I know is one. I know there's like I think there's something with Kenyan, but like I never did any of those, but I have heard good things about them, so maybe.
Yeah, and like Matt said before, I think what really contributed to his writing was just the fact that he wrote 500 words every single day, and he also just like always enjoyed it and always practiced. So I think it just comes with practice, honestly.
Mhm.
And yeah, lastly, Dobie Lin, he said, any tips on preparing for your writing for Scholastic writing contest? Did you write your essay with the writing competition in mind, or did you just submit a piece of writing that you really liked?
The latter. I didn't
Mhm.
write anything for the competition specifically. I just submitted like anything that I had written. I honestly think like Scholastic's kind of interesting because I think like this was among my favorites that I submitted, but like some of the ones that they like did like give like keys to, I was like, really? And then some of like I thought the ones that didn't win were better. Um, so it can be kind of random in that regard. But I would just
Mhm.
say submit whatever you have. And they also have like financial aid if it's like a financial burden. But yeah, they were all like senior year too, because I didn't know like the competition existed until then. So that's when they all got submitted.
Right. And if you're curious about his piece, and if you weren't here with us at the beginning where Matt actually read it to us, you can find the piece online in this Google Drive. You actually can't find it online anywhere else. So you should click
Oh,
on that
really?
link. Yeah, because I actually tried to look for it, and I even looked on your website, but I couldn't find like a text for it. So basically I just like took a bunch of pictures of like the book,
Oh, okay.
and yeah, I just put them in the Google Drive. So this might be the only place that you can access them online if you don't have a book. So I would suggest you clicking on that link.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and one quick question for just like my personal interest. You talk about the contemporary Asian American stories class that you took
Oh,
at Stanford. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and also like the professor that taught that class?
yes. It is I would say like pretty definitively it's my favorite class to take this year. It's just
Mhm.
like 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 those English classes where like you go in and like each like usually like the way a lot of English classes are structured is like you read a piece and then you go in and discuss it like during
Mhm.
the class, and that's like how it is. And I feel like
Yeah.
those are very hit or miss, and it's entirely contingent on like the class that you actually have. But the class is full of like almost all Asian American students who are like really, actively choose to take the class and are like really interested in it. So the discussions are like very passionate, very fun. Like a lot of us like, it's like fun to talk about like some of the crazy characters that exist. And it's just like super enjoyable, and all the stuff we've read is like super cool. And actually one of the things I really like is that it's not just like short stories. So memoirs, um, short and long fiction, so novels and short stories, um, movies, graphic novels, just like the sheer amount of stuff we've been able to read is cool. Like in high school, it's usually like one or two like novels or like a bunch of short stories, but this was like a lot more, and it never felt like busy work because I'm like, this is stuff that I would read anyways, and I get to do it
Mhm.
for a class, which is like really cool. Um, we, I wonder what my favorite is. Like, I think the story. Oh, I mean, Interior Chinatown, I would say is my favorite. That's so cool. Um, and yeah, professor's name is Shimon Tanaka. He teaches here. He actually lives in San Francisco as well, which is kind of funny. Um, but yeah, he's such a fantastic professor, and I really love taking his class. So
Mhm.
yeah,
Do you mind typing his name in the chat? Actually, I would
yeah,
love to look him up after this.
hmm but yeah,
Yeah.
if anyone like if you're ever at Stanford and you're not sure what to take, I highly recommend it.
Mhm. Is he a Pacific Islander? Or like where
Yes,
exactly is he? He's a Pacific
I
Islander. Yeah.
yeah, I think he's Japanese.
He's Japanese. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So I think that's all the questions that we have for today. If there are no more questions from the audience. And real quick, before we end, AFI does have our own group chat, and I am technically working for YEFA, YEFA, which is like a subunit under AFI that's catering specifically towards the youth. So
Mhm.
if Miss Allison could pull up the QR code real quick, I would love for all of you to join our group chat so that we can continue to have more discussions in the future. And yeah, it's basically like a WeChat group chat, and you can scan the QR code to join. So, yep. Give me 1 second to put that up so that we can scan the QR code and join for like future conversations. Allison, real quick, are you still there? Okay, so I'm going to take that as a no.
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay, there she is. Can you share your screen real quick of the QR code so that people can scan it
Okay.
and join? Yeah.
Wait a second.
There you go. So that's the QR code to the group chat. And if you want to have more conversations like this, and if you want to follow us more closely in the future, please join that group chat. And lastly, I would just like to thank you again, Matt, for being here. Thank you so much for the insight that you've shared with us today, and taking time out of your heck. You're probably on break right now, right?
Nope.
You're not
We're
on
still
break.
going.
Well,
Yep.
well, then taking your time out of your hectic end of the year time for us and for furthering the cause for Asian American and especially Asian American youth. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah,
And
thanks so much for having me. This was super fun.
thank you. And like Matt said before, I think the best way for us to keep on being in touch with our identity and keep on having faith in our identity is to have a community so that we do not have to feel like we have to change to belong. And this is exactly what we're trying to do here with AFI, with EFI, with Voice of Asian Youth, and with myself. We want to create a community so that we can feel like we no longer have to change ourselves. We no longer have to be someone different to belong. And that's what we want to do. And that's why we're all here today. So thank you so much for being with us today. And I hope I have created a community for you. And I hope we can continue to be a part of this community and create more communities ourselves in the future. Thank you so much. And if you have any more lingering questions that you would like to ask me and Matt yourself, you're welcome to stay. And if you do not, thank you so much for joining us today and have a good night.